Thank you for joining me here today. My name's Phoebe Davis, and I'm an artist and researcher based in South Wales and working across the UK. As part of the Hell Space programme, Artist Mundi have invited me to make a short video of top tips for artists when it comes to fundraising for your practice, whether that's applying for grants, bursaries, opportunities, or public funding. But before we dive into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. So I'm making this video from my studio in South Wales, just outside Bridgend. My practice spans moving image, performance, print and sound, with a current focus on making performance for camera. Alongside my work as an artist and director, I also work with artist collectives and DIY spaces, spanning arts education and social practice. Here are a few images of my work. In parallel to my studio practice, I also have an ongoing collaboration with performer and choreographer Nandi Bebe. As Bebe and Davis, we direct performance work spanning stage and screen. I've had the opportunity to exhibit nationally and internationally, often working long-term in collaboration, showing in galleries and museums, and I'm specifically interested in showing work in the public realm. So, a little bit more about myself. I come from a farming community in South Wales. I'm from a family of farmers. At 18, I went to art school in London, and following that stayed in London and began working in arts organisations with a focus on visual arts and live performance. When I started working in the arts, I'd had little to no exposure of how arts organisations work. And most importantly, no idea how artists forge a career, make money, or support themselves to maintain a studio practice. Alongside my creative flair, I also have a passion for maths and a spreadsheet. So when working for different arts organisations, I tried to get my hands on any budgets or grant applications. I tried to see as many of these as I could to understand how public arts funding worked in the UK. And I'm also dyslexic, and I realised that if I was going to apply for funding, I had to learn tricks to write about my work to be able to apply for grants and opportunities. I've now worked in the arts for about 15 years, nearly all of these years in part-time roles across arts education, lecturing or producing, as well as my work being commissioned by institutions. Predominantly all of my experiences within the public arts sector, not the commercial sector. I have informally been supporting mates and mates of mates to fundraise for the last decade, and 3 years ago, after the birth of my first son, I was advised by artist mates to offer this more formally so that artists who didn't know me could book me for a one-to-one session, and through this, the arts initiative Fieldwork Artist Support was born. Through Fieldwork, I offer one-to-one sessions focused on artistic practice and career development, fundraising and commissioning support, such as application writing, strategy for sustainable career development, partnership and touring consultation, so looking at budget, schedules and production planning, and group professional development workshops. Over the last 2 years, Fieldwork has evolved. Since having 2 children, I've moved out of London and returned to live in South Wales on my sister's tenant farm, Slade Farm Organics, working alongside her and her partner Graham. Fieldwork is rooted in and shaped by the rural culture I was raised in and organic farming principles. Our programme aims to nurture arts, ecology and agriculture through organic farming, community growing workshops, a community veg patch, a schools ecology programme, alongside rural residencies, research and artist support. It sounds expansive. It is. Yet we are very DIY, operating on a limited budget, and as we are situated on a tenancy, stewarding and renting the land, our existence is precarious. The fundraising hacks that I have gathered have been drawn from my experience as an artist and the dozens of artists I've worked with over the last 3 years. My aim is to support artist communities to access funds, negotiate fees, and pay themselves appropriately. So today, I'm going to share with you my top tips. Firstly, we need to understand the context. I'm going to speak about this from a public funding perspective. From my experience, there are varied ways of funding artworks, events, and exhibitions. I've mapped out 9 here. So we have new work and commissions, commissioned by galleries, institutions, or festivals. Professional development grants, again, probably negotiated by galleries, institutions, festivals, or arts organisations. Public funding, so that would be government funding distributed through arts councils. Local council or local authority funding, which might be managed by your local county borough. Trust and foundations, philanthropy, sponsorship, corporate social responsibility, and of course the commercial gallery sector, so profit made through sale of artworks. In the UK, most projects, galleries or arts organisations are likely to have some mix of the above funding their programmes. And of course, in the UK, we have 4 core government publicly funded bodies: Arts Council of Northern Ireland, Arts Council Wales, Creative Scotland, and Arts Council England. You can apply for funding from any of these arts councils if you're an individual or organisation based in that country. You don't need to be a UK citizen, but you must be based or living in that specific area of the UK. It is a precarious time for public funding in the UK, and at the time of recording this, Creative Scotland have just closed their fund for individuals. Alongside these publicly funded Arts Council grants, there are arts organisations, trust and foundations all across the UK who offer funding, grants and schemes for artist development. And alongside this talk is a supporting PDF document, and in there you'll find a useful list of organisations, wider funders, opportunities, and also Instagram accounts that it might be worth finding out more about or following just to keep up to date to see what opportunities are out there. So today I'm going to focus on public funding or funding distributed by arts organisations. It's also worth highlighting that depending on your project or research theme, you may be eligible for adjacent arts funding. Okay, so what do I mean by arts adjacent funding? For example, from 2013 to 2018, I was part of the Bedfellows Collective alongside artists Jenny Moore and Chloe Cooper. Bedfellows was a research project that explored radical queer sex education. And our activities and research weren't just commissioned by arts organisations and arts funders, but also charities and trust and foundations working for women's rights, feminism, LGBTQ+ campaigning, and sex education charities. And another research project that led to my first solo show at Sight Gallery in Sheffield, which was called Points of Rupture, was developed through extended research with female athletes and sports coaches and medics. To realise this work, alongside arts funding, the curator Angelica Sule and I navigated sponsorship from a sports flooring company, and we also applied to Sports England to support our public programme of events. One thing to flag here is that when applying to trusts and foundations for research or activity, they may not directly fund individuals, so you may need to partner with an arts organisation or arts charity for them to apply on your behalf. Okay, hack 1. Read the guidelines and criteria. It may seem obvious, but please carefully read the grant's requirements and eligibility criteria. When assessing your application, the funders will be marking off your answers against this criteria. Your arts activity or your proposal will need to align with the funder's mission and priorities. So sit down in a quiet area and jot down a few notes on how you can fit the criteria. And don't waste your time. Make sure that your project is the right fit for this call out. Hack 2. Start with the budget. When writing any funding application, I always start with the budget. This may seem counterintuitive, but starting this way kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It enables you to A, see what activity you want to do, and B, what you can afford. This allows you to see if you are overestimating the time, aka money, it will take you to deliver your activity. In the accompanying PDF, you can see an example of a generic budget, which I've drafted for the R&D of a performance. So, 1, read the criteria. 2, map out the activity you want to achieve. 3, budget the activity accordingly. Okay, so let's have a look at that. For example, 1, the criteria may outline, make a step change in your career. So then let's look at the activity. 2, you may suggest studio or collaborative time to learn a new skill. You might suggest that you want to build a network of programmers and curators. And you might suggest to do this through studio visits for them to see your work in person. Okay, so that's your activity. And then 3, if we look at it in the budget, you'll cost out studio time or collaborative or mentorship costs, or you might budget out 2 studio visits with curators. And in that, you might cover their travel and fee within the budget. And please remember to pay yourself. So many artists don't factor in their own time for work. And it's useful maybe referencing the artist information company for rates of pay, so you can see what you may be putting for your day rate or the day rate of your collaborators. Okay, hack 3. Why this project? Why now? You need to draft a compelling narrative and tell a clear and engaging story about your work. Start by writing down a few things about why you think this project is flipping exciting, urgent, and needed. This can be shaped into an artistic vision and the significance of the project and why it matters to your audience and the community at large, and also your artist practice. Write it in your own voice and say why you're excited by this project. And please be specific. Clearly outline your project goals, timeline, and expected outcomes. And again, for this, you'll need to go back to the criteria. You want to show a progression from A to B. So A, supporting this activity, leads to B, this outcome. So A, studio visits with the curators, leads to B, expanding my programme and network across the UK, building curatorial dialogue, which will then lead to future development, presentation or work commissions, diversifying my audience and reach, and hopefully income streams. And feel free to use their language, the criteria, the way they write about what they're looking for, to use that language back at them to make your point. Hack 4, partners and highlighting community engagement. I am dyslexic and I find it incredibly useful to use maps to show the reach of my projects. One of my favourite things to do is map my project ecosystems to outline how I work and who I work with. This is an example of a map I use to show the reach of a fieldwork residency. For this, you can think about what are my informal networks, who do I want to work with, who am I working with, and also what do they bring to the project. Funders love to see the reach of projects, especially with cross-sector connections. Okay, and moving on to community engagement. If it aligns with your work, you can describe how your project will engage the community and foster collaboration. Funders often value projects that have a broader impact. And remember, even if you think you're not necessarily working directly with a community, most likely you will have a local arts community or community of peers and mates. So you could always say something along the lines of, supporting me to develop this work will not only impact my practice and my longevity as an artist, but it will also enable me to share this knowledge with my collaborators and peers. And feel free to mention demographics if relevant. And you can say, by collaborating with your peers or different artists you bring in, you are broadening the networks and reinforcing the skill sets of your local arts community. Hack 5. What's the urgent need? Arts funding can be limited and competitive. It's important to flag what difference this opportunity, support or money will make to your practice in the short term and the long term, and why is this needed in the sector. Don't be afraid to fight your corner for your research, medium and craft, as we need to amplify, nurture and platform our individual arts practices. And you can be honest here, talk about the hurdles you face and the barriers. Be explicit. You can say that things won't or can't happen without this funding and support. Hack 6. Me. Big up yourself. Unlimited self-belief. You are selling this project and yourself. You need to be excited and passionate about your work. As artists, we can all struggle from self-doubt, yet we are incredibly resourceful and essential critical thinkers in society. We need the funder to believe in our ability and drive. So I find it useful to write about myself in the third person, like a friend I really admire and that I'm advocating for. Don't be shy. Sing your skills and achievements from the rooftops. Here's an example about how I write about myself. And remember, it doesn't matter if you haven't had any solo shows yet or you haven't been supported by massive organisations. You can list places that are a lot more DIY, lo-fi or in the public realm, even if this is hosting events in your front room. For example, in 2012, no one was programming my work, so I made a site-specific work on the farm, which was called Elope to the Hills. This work I did totally off my own back, and it was made out of duct tape and silage bales, which was the only thing I had access to at the time. You can see it in this image. On my CV, I stated this as a public installation developed through a rural residency commission at Slade Farm Organics. Okay, hack 7, invest in your images. This is actually a top tip from curator and artist mentor Kerry Hand. Your images matter, invest in them. And you're going to need these images to highlight and showcase your work. Include high quality samples of previous work, and this can be incredibly useful to help grant readers visualise what you're trying to do, your vision and your capabilities. If you can, document your work properly. If you can afford it, get a professional photographer to document your work. And if you can't afford it, ask a friend or use a good camera to get the images you want. Decent images can make such a difference to an application, and it can also help build the profile of your work. Okay, moving on to hack 8, seek feedback and access needs. Okay, seeking feedback. Before submitting, ask a trusted friend or peer to review your application. Fresh eyes can catch errors and provide valuable insight. You could also offer an exchange or time swap, so you could offer to read a future application of your mates in exchange for them reading your application now. This will allow you to learn a great deal by seeing how others write about their practice. Okay, and access needs. It's worth noting that many organisations are putting funds in place during the application process to remove barriers for artists with access needs. For example, if you are neurodiverse or dyslexic, this could include support to help you to write your application. So that would mean paying for an access support worker to work with you. The amount of support you would get would depend on how lengthy the application is. But not all organisations advertise this publicly. So if you don't see this offer on their website or in the guidelines, it's worth emailing the fund and asking directly if they offer access support for application writing. Even if they say no, highlighting this need and barrier will mean that they may put it in place for their next round of funding. So it's really worth emailing them or reaching out. Hack 9. 5 in, 1 back. Not everything you submit will be successful, and that is okay. but you must not give up. It really stings when you spend time writing an application and it is rejected. But as artists, we must remember that whether the application is successful or not is not a sign of the quality of the work. There are many reasons, quotas, demographics, geographical locations, budget and reach limitations that may be taken into consideration to why this decision is made, and you will not be privy to this information. And in many cases, the most groundbreaking work is the most difficult to get funded. So you must keep going and strive to push this work out there. I live by the attitude, 5 applications out, and hopefully 1 comes back in successful. We just got to bash out the applications and forget about them. After I press submit, I like to think, it's now out of my hands. I tried my hardest. I don't know what is going to happen, so I try not to get my hopes up. And when you are not successful, I would advise you always ask for feedback. It can really help you shape your next application. And finally, hack 10. It ain't got to be perfect, it just got to be done. Writing funding applications can be intimidating, exhausting, boring, and often can lead to you avoiding doing it or giving up halfway through. It can take a lot of energy to apply, so I'd advise we must try to separate these tasks from our creative energy. And don't give the application your emotional energy. See it as a learning opportunity, a hoop to jump through. So in the words of artist Lania Roberts, it ain't got to be perfect, it just got to be done. You just need to jump into it. Put on some focus music, make a cup of tea and eat biscuits, set yourself a timer to answer questions so you don't take too long, and dance about when you get bored. Try and enjoy it and get this shit done. Okay, that's my 10 top tips. I hope you found it useful. If you want to get in contact with me, my details are on my website, phoebedavis.co.uk, or on the Fieldwork website. Good luck with the application writing. Diolch yn fawr.